Okay, today I'm just going to be going through some more terms that I'm personally struggling with because we're getting closer to that test date and I just want to kind of speak them out loud and maybe teach them. So we have the concept of respondent and operant conditioning. Within those concepts, we have phylogeny and ontogeny. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing those correctly, but we're just going to move on for time's sake. Phylogeny pertains to respondent behaviors varying from an organism's evolutionary history. So it encompasses behaviors that have been genetically inherited and shaped over generations through the process of natural selection. This is going to be more respondent conditioning. The notion allows with the evolutionary history of a species as it aligns with the evolutionary history of a species, and specific behaviors have evolved to enhance the organism's fitness in its environment. Ontogeny is it denotes learning that arises from an organism's interaction with its environment. It's the process by which an individual's behaviors are shaped through exposure to various experiences, shaping an organism's behavioral repertoire. So operant behavior, right, governed by the ontogeny, involves behaviors that are influenced by their consequences and are acquired over an organism's lifetime. So phylogeny, I'm really just going to remember as evolution, right? It's kind of like out of our control. This is just how we're evolving. Ontogeny is learned, right, from an organism's interactions. So it's going to be more of what we are seeing on a day-to-day basis, or I guess more of what we're paying attention to on a day-to-day basis. But let's continue. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just flipping through my notes, and anything I'm seeing that I'm like, oh, I kind of want to speak that out loud, that's just what I'm doing. So socially mediated and automatic reinforcement. Socially mediated positive reinforcement is going to be that first function is access to something in the environment, which can be further broken down into two categories, attention and tangible. This means that a student may engage in a behavior to gain attention from others or to obtain a desired behavior or activity. So, for example, right, an example of socially mediated positive reinforcement would be a child may throw a tantrum in a store to get a candy bar, right? It's for attention, tangible, access. So it's just access to something in the environment that can be further broken down into categories. Socially mediated negative reinforcements, sort of similar, right? Except the negative reinforcement aspect, it's escaping something in the environment, meaning that a student can engage in a behavior to avoid or escape from something aversive in the environment. So this could include tasks, social situations, or sensory experiences that the student finds unpleasant. For instance, a student may refuse to participate in a math lesson or run away from a loud or busy cafeteria, right? Named escape and avoidance, socially mediated negative reinforcement. When we move to automatic positive reinforcement, that is the third function, is access to something in the body, also known as like a sensory behavior. This refers to engaging in behavior to gain sensory input that feels good or satisfying, such as twirling hair or tapping fingers. This type of behavior is not necessarily problematic, but it can become disruptive if it interferes with learning or social interactions. So that's where we'll look out for it, but that's that automatic positive reinforcement, right? It's not being given by others. That's just automatically reinforcing to you. And then there's the automatic negative reinforcement, right? The fourth function is escaping something in the body, which is also referred to as like pain attenuation. That's going to be the most common way to remember it. This occurs when a student engages in a high behavior or in a behavior to escape or alleviate physical discomfort or pain. So such as like a scratch or or scratching an itch, sorry, or taking medication for a headache, right? It is important, though, to ensure that any medical issues are properly addressed before addressing this type of behavior in a behavior intervention plan. So, really fast, just to like quickly run over those again. Socially mediated in the environment, right? The effects it'll have on behavior, it increases the behavior. Socially mediated positive reinforcement, access, attention, seeking connection, seeking tangible, seeking something, right? Socially mediated negative reinforcement, escape, demand, avoidance. Is it a decrease in behavior? Is it an increase in behavior? Are we looking at positive or negative? And then for automatic, it's in the body. It's going to increase or decrease the behavior depending on what we're talking about. Is it reinforcement? Is it positive or negative reinforcement? Negative reinforcement is going to be that pain attenuation, pain or discomfort avoidance. And then positive reinforcement is going to be sensory seeking, stereotypy, stimulatory behavior. All right. Moving on. We know conditioned, unconditioned. We know all this. Confident with this. Pretty good. Now, I'm pretty good with the schedules of reinforcement. Like fixed ratio, fixed interval, variable ratio, variable interval. I feel pretty confident on those overall, but when it comes to looking at the graphs, I still want to dig a little bit deeper into remembering how to remember the graphs. So, fixed ratio is a type of intermittent reinforcement schedule in which reinforcement is provided after a fixed number of responses. I'm going to pull my phone down here. For example, if reinforcement is provided on an FR2, it's every 2 times the student correctly responds that they would receive reinforcement. So similarly, if reinforcement is provided on an FR5, every 5 times the student correctly responds, they would receive reinforcement. So fixed ratio schedules are effective in establishing and maintaining a behavior as they provide a clear and predictable reinforcement schedule. So when you're looking at fixed ratio on a graph, you're going to be looking at a diagonal slant with these points in there showing where they're getting regular reinforcement based on the schedule, right? So every 5, boom. Every 5, boom. Every 5, boom. That's an FR5. And it's just going to be a gradual diagonal line, if that makes sense, from the midpoint of the graph. From the midpoint of the X and Y axis, I guess is better to say. But for fixed interval, whenever you hear interval, immediately think time, right? And I'm saying this to myself too. Whenever I hear interval, I'm going to immediately think time. Fixed interval schedule is a type of reinforcement schedule in which reinforcement is provided after a fixed number of times has passed. So for example, if reinforcement is provided on an F13, let's do 3. An FI3, the first correct response after 3 minutes has passed, would receive reinforcement. So the way this looks on a graph is it's semi-similar to fixed ratio, right? It's that diagonal line, but instead of seeing that straight line, you're going to see like a scallop because it's that wait. 3 minutes. Okay, now I get reinforcement. Wait. 3 minutes. Now I get reinforcement. So it's the scallop effect on the graph. If you're really looking like to draw that line, you're going to see, oh, look, here's another wait. Here's another wait. And it's going in that diagonal motion upwards, but that's what it'll look like. So the scalloped is the fixed interval. Variable ratio, it's the most addictive. It's the schedule of reinforcement in which the reinforcement is provided after an average number of responses, but the exact number of responses required for reinforcement is unknown, right? Because it's variable. So, for an example, have I been saying variable ratio? I hope I have been saying. That's what we're on. We're on variable ratio. So, for example, a variable ratio 2, a VR2 schedule, means that reinforcement will be provided after an average of 2 correct responses, right? Just an average. It doesn't have to be every 2. But the exact number of responses required for the reinforcement varies. So you could do, okay, they had 2 correct responses. Let's give them reinforcement. But then the next time, oh, they had 3 correct responses in a row. Let's give them some reinforcement. Now they had 2, and I can tell it's getting a little tough. Let's give them reinforcement again. Now they just did 5. Let's give them reinforcement, right? So it's an average of every 2. I'm going to take a drink really quick. Okay, the way this looks on a graph is variable ratio is going to be a bit of a steeper line coming from the X and Y 0 point on the graph. And it's going to come up, and you're going to see those various points where it's like, oh, now it was 2, now it was 3, now it went back to 2, now it went to 5, now it's at 3, now it's at 2. It's not going to look staggered. It's going to be more straight up, if that makes sense. And now moving on to variable interval. We're going to have variable interval schedules are a type of intermittent schedule where reinforcement is provided after a variable amount of time has passed since the last reinforcement was delivered. The key feature of variable interval schedule is that the time between reinforcement varies around a predetermined average. Variable interval schedules can be effective in maintaining behavior because they prevent learners from anticipating when the next reinforcement will be delivered. This unpredictability makes the behavior more resistant to extinction. So variable interval schedules are commonly used in real world settings, such as when a boss checks in on an employee's work, right? You don't really know when your boss is going to come. They just show up periodically throughout the day. An example of a VI2 schedule would be reinforcing the correct response after an average of 2 minutes has passed since the last reinforcement was delivered. For example, a teacher may provide verbal praise to a student who has been paying attention and participating in the class discussions after an average of 2 minutes has passed since the last time they were provided. She doesn't have a timer, right? She might, but she's not actively looking at her timer and being like, oh, 2 minutes has passed, because what would that be? That would be fixed interval. She is just saying, okay, I'm going to check the clock every so often, and 3 minutes has passed and Johnny has been doing his work and staying on task. I'm going to give him some reinforcement. And now I notice 5 minutes has passed and he's still really on task. I'm going to give him some more reinforcement. And now I notice his leg is bouncing, but he's staying on task. He might look a little antsy, and it's been 2 minutes. I'm going to give him some more reinforcement, right? It's not that intentional the way I'm making it sound. It's just that unpredictable reinforcement to keep the behavior going. And that's that. All right, let's touch on these schedules of reinforcement, because I am struggling with these a lot. We'll start with concurrent, but I'm going to pull out some other notes because I've been taking like whiteboard notes on this as well. And I really liked the way I was writing it down the other day, and I think that this will be a little bit easier maybe to remember this way. Oh man, okay. Maturation, extinction, and... Okay, here we go. Well, the first one we're going to start out with is concurrent. This is definitely, like I said, it's my hardest section, so just be easy on me. I'm definitely reading off my notes a bit more. But here we go. A concurrent schedule involves the simultaneous operation of two or more distinct schedules of reinforcement, each associated with its corresponding discriminative stimulus, functioning autonomously in relation to two or more behaviors, right? Think the matching law. It's a principle that characterizes behavior choice under such circumstances. It posits that when presented with multiple response alternatives concurrently, individuals tend to allocate their behavior in proportions that mirror the distribution of reinforcers among those alternatives. Those are big words. This literally just means what behavior am I going to participate in, and what reinforcement am I going to get that I think is fair. If somebody's telling me I can read and get candy every 3 minutes I read, or I can do math and get candy every 10 minutes I do math, then I'm probably going to do the reading because that seems more fair to me. It's just the choice, the assent and choice of two schedules. That is what concurrent schedule is. Example 1. Consider a student who is provided with two sets of math worksheets, one blue containing additional problems and the other red containing subtraction problems. The student faces the option of engaging in either addition, subtraction, or the combination of both. For solving 10 additional problems, the student receives a reinforcer, and for every 5 correct subtraction problems, another reinforcer is earned. So do we want to do the addition problems or the subtraction problems, or do we want to do both, right? That's the choice with concurrent schedule. Here's another example. Imagine Mary, who earns $10 upon completing her homework and an additional $5 for her cello practice. Both tasks and homework and cello practice are accessible to her concurrently, and she can opt to work on either task individually or both simultaneously as she prefers. So you can combine to get the mixture, right? And then I do want it concurrent. In simple terms, is just two or more schedules at the same time. Do you want to math or do you want to play, basically? All right, let's move on to the next ones. All right, then we have multiple schedules. Multiple schedules involve the sequential operation of two or more fundamental schedules of reinforcement, all targeting the same specific behavior. These schedules are typically all targeting the same specific behavior. Did I say that already? Sorry. These schedules are typically implemented in an arbitrary sequence, often randomly interpersed. Okay, I'm reading off my notes. I'm sorry. Each schedule corresponds with its distinctive discriminative stimulus and prescribes particular criteria for earning reinforcement. Upon fulfilling the response requirements, the active schedule reinforcement is dispensed. Let's go over an example because that was a lot. And again, I'm going to pull up my notes that I have from these schedules because I think that's going to help me a little bit here. Not that. Not these, not those. I must not have notes on these for this. Okay, well, we'll read from here. Example 1. Consider a student who alternates between receiving either a blue worksheet or a white worksheet on different days. With the selection being randomized, each worksheet contains 20 additional problems. On days when the blue worksheet is presented, successfully solving the problems garners the student 10 reinforcers. Conversely, on white worksheet days, accomplishing the task results in the student earning 5 reinforcers. But you don't know which one. Example 2, imagine Mary who earns $10 for her violin practice and $5 for her cello practice. Each day, Mary draws a piece of paper from the container, determining whether she should practice the violin or cello for that session. The randomized selection, be very clear, it's randomized selection of the practice instrument dictates the active schedule. When Mary adheres to the prescribed practice regimen, she attains the specified reinforcers associated with the chosen instrument. So multiple schedules involve the sequential operation of 2 or more fundamental schedules of reinforcement, all targeting that same specific behavior. And really fast, I am going to pull up some other notes from this because for some reason they didn't print out, but I have written pretty good notes from this. Okay. The difference between all of these compound schedules is going to be, is there a signal, right? An SD. So the ones we have currently went over so far are concurrent and multiple. Concurrent is a choice. Multiple, it does have a signal. You're alternating with a specific cue, like work at home versus work at school. Let's move on to chain schedules. Chain schedules encompass the sequential integration of 2 or more fundamental schedules, each associated with a distinct discriminative stimulus operating in a predetermined sequence. Oh, I'm gonna sneeze. I'm so sorry. Bless me. Okay. I think I'm done, but sometimes I have to sneeze more than once. Okay. So they're operating in a predetermined sequence, right? For chain, there is a signal, but there's also an order to this. So you must do step 1 in order to get to step 2, in order to, I don't know, maybe end. But here's an example of chain schedules. A student engages in a worksheet that contains 20 additional problems as the initial component. Upon its completion, the student progresses to the subsequent component involving 10 subtraction problems. Only upon fulfilling the requirements of both components does the student receive reinforcement. So in the proper order, they have to do both schedules in order to reinforce. A student must do this or this and this to get that. That's the way I'm remembering it. Here's another example of chained. Mary's routine entails a chain schedule where completing her homework represents the initial component. Only after the homework is finished can she move on to the second component, practicing her cello. Once her cello practice is successful, or it doesn't have to be successful, but it needs to be successfully accomplished, she is rewarded with $10 as reinforcement. Homework and cello, then you get reinforcement. All right, let's move on to mixed schedule. Is there a signal in mixed schedule? That's the first thing that you should know, right? There's no SD, so there's no signal. A mixed schedule involves the sequential presentation of 2 or more fundamental schedules of reinforcement. It's often in that unpredictable sequence. So it's just like multiple, but you don't know which schedule is active. In multiple, you do know which schedule is active. You just don't know when it's coming, but you do know which phase you're in. In mixed, you're you behave for both adjusting, and in real world, reinforcement changes without us knowing. So I actually really like this one. Example 1, consider a student who receives a daily math worksheet of the same color. The student's reinforcement is contingent on 2 distinct criteria at times. They receive a reinforcer after successfully completing 10 accurate problems, while at other times the reinforcer is delivered after the first correct response following the passage of 1 minute, right? So it's just random. And when we're going back to multiple, right, that same student had a blue worksheet and then also had a white worksheet. So they knew which schedule they were on based on the color of the worksheets, where in mixed schedule, they don't know which schedule they're on because it's the same color for both. Another example is Mary's reinforcement schedule is mixed, involving varying rewards for completing her homework. On certain occasions, she receives $5 for completing her homework, whereas other times her mother decides to be more generous and provides her $10 upon completion. Then there's tandem schedule. Tandem schedule involves the sequential operation of two or more fundamental schedules of reinforcement in a predetermined sequence, akin to chained schedules. So it's just like chained, but there's no SD, and it must meet both the schedule in the right order. So it's chained with no SD, like I said. There's no cues in between the steps, but you have to complete this in the specific order that is required. So the example is, consider a student who tackles a worksheet containing math problems. Upon successfully completing 10 problems, the student receives a reinforcer. Additionally, after a 2-minute interval has elapsed, the student is reinforced for the first correct response made during that time. Or an example for Mary, Mary's tasks entail completing 5 pages of homework. After a span of 20 minutes has passed, she becomes eligible for reinforcement if she manages to complete a page within that time frame. The reward is a sum of $10. And then alternative schedule. Oh, there's 2 more. Alternative schedule has no SD. It is combined. It's like with tandem, they have to do both, but here they just need to do one. So the alternative schedule is entailing the attainment of reinforcement by fulfilling the response criteria of any one of 2 or more concurrently active component schedules. Some examples. A student engages with a math problem worksheet and begins working. If the student successfully answers 15 problems correctly before 10 minutes have passed, reinforcement is provided. Conversely, if the 15 problem threshold is not met within the 10-minute interval, the student receives reinforcement for the first correct response following the 10-minute mark. So giving something to keep them going. And then in Mary's examples, Mary's practice regimen involves her cello. So she practices 5 pages of music within a 30-minute time frame. She receives $5 as reinforcement. However, if Mary is unable to complete the 5 pages within the allotted time, she still earns $5 for the initial page she completes after the 30 minutes. 2 schedules, and if you meet the requirements of one, it is reset. So you basically only have to do one to meet the requirements. It's just which one are you going to do to earn that reinforcement. So it's going to always give them something to keep going. And then the last one, conjunctive schedules. It's like a both and for ratio and interval, and you must finish both. So it involves the acquisition of reinforcement upon successfully fulfilling the response criteria for 2 or more schedules of reinforcement that operate concurrently. So in this arrangement, both schedules must be satisfactorily completed to trigger the delivery of the reinforcement. So fulfillment is dependent on other requirements, one after the other without SDs, one after the other, right? Example 1, the student engages with a math problems worksheet. The student is required to answer 15 math problems as one component of the schedule. After that, the first accurate response following a 10-minute interval, another component must be met. Only upon successfully meeting the criteria for both components does the student receive reinforcement. And then for Mary's example, Mary's task consists of completing 5 pages of homework, which forms the initial component of the schedule. Subsequently, the second component dictates that she must complete the first page correctly after 30-minute time lapse. Only when both of these components are fulfilled does Mary earn reinforcement. So alternative is the either or, but conjunctive is you have to meet both to earn reinforcement. Both or and. If you see both or and in questions, it's conjunctive. If you see either or in questions, it's alternative. And then if you're looking at questions that are talking about order, you can think either tandem or chained. If there's no signal, it's tandem. If there's a signal, it's chained. If you see questions that have alternative schedules with a specific cue, it's multiple. If you see questions similar to that but with no signal, like you don't know which schedule is active, then it's mixed. And then concurrent, it's just 2 or more schedules available at once. So having that choice for math versus reading. And those are the compound schedules again. And I think to go with this, it's important to touch on experimental designs. Reversal is going to have that cause and effect, the most powerful, unethical for dangerous behaviors. It's returning to baseline. Alternating is going to look like rapid comparison, best for comparing 2 treatments quickly. Multiple baseline is staggered, best for behavior you can't unlearn. Procedural integrity here ensures that the intervention stays the same across all steps, so multiple steps and settings. Changing criterion step by step for increasing a single behavior in increments. Consistently changing the goal, right? First you're going to meet 50, then you're going to meet 75, then 80, etc. Group designs are big disadvantage is that they mask individuals' progress and variability. I think that'll be good for today.